What's up, internets? It's your boy, Jonah. How's it going? So, today I'm going to be talking about empirical evidence, what it means to me, and how it's often a topic of debate in atheist and Christian circles alike. And first off, let's get it out of the way what exactly empirical evidence is. And we will go for that first. So, let's go ahead and Google it right now. So, empirical evidence is, let's use the old school definition of Britannica, information gathered directly or indirectly through observation or experimentation that may be used to confirm or disconfirm confirm or disconfirm a scientific theory to help justify or establish a person's belief in a given proposition. A belief may be said to be justified if there is sufficient evidence to make the holding of the belief reasonable. So basically, a lot of times, what I'll see in debate groups and things like that, and often here online through my YouTube videos and things that I watch, is that the atheists particularly, seem to claim empirical evidence more often than the Christians do. And the reason for that is because this. So obviously, you have the Bible, and the Bible is the main source of God's word, right? So it's the way that most Christians would say that God speaks to them because although they do feel him in prayer, God doesn't really speak to them out loud. It's more inner dialogue. And part of that is a problem in that inner dialogue, you got to recognize it as that. Like, you understand who the voice inside of your head is, and whether that is your own personally generated persona or whether that is somebody else that's invaded your head, in which case you probably would have a psychological condition. I believe schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder would be the common diagnoses of what is happening in your head if you have multiple voices in there. So if God did in fact speak to you through your brain, which he should be able to do as God, that can create its own issues, because then you can't verify necessarily what's going on in your head, and most people would consider you to be a psycho. In the Bible, we see that often God the Father, I guess in most cases when God is speaking to someone like Abraham or Moses, he's speaking to them through either an apparatus or something. He is talking to them through Moses, the burning bush. Through Abraham, I guess they just had dialogue. How that worked out without him being spooked by God's glory, again, is not entirely clear. But he seems to be able to speak with God directly, which is cool. So but the problem with the modern era is that, of course, we now have been given the Holy Spirit, right, in the modern church era. And as such, the Holy Spirit is not something we necessarily touch or interact with, but it's more something that's inside of us, something that gives the believer his power to handle Satan and his demons. And again, that goes back to the point of who is the voice that's in your head is talking to you. So to give proof of that, you can't really do that, because you can't let other people inside your head. There's no Vulcan mind meld. There's no current way to share a person's emotions, feelings, and things like that based on what we currently have available that I'm aware of. They can kind of map out your brain. They can do one of those scans of your brain that shows the highlighted areas when you're thinking. But even at its best, it can't directly translate my memories and thoughts into somebody else. The best way I have to do that currently would be to record on video, and send video proof to someone that my video recording equipment has not been tampered with, to basically prove, video evidence is currently probably close to the best layman's way to show that something happened when we say, hey, prove that. If you have it on video, then more likely you are correct. Now, with the advent of AI and with the advent of video editing software, obviously there's more skepticism in it now than there used to be. However, and it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference because of how much AI is becoming more and more into our lifestyle. But the basic gist of it is that you can generally trust. For the most part, again, hold with a grain of salt, but for the most part, we generally trust what we see on video to be accurate. Because our eyes, to us, even though our eyes can lie and deceive us, as shown on the Netflix show that I watch, Mind Games. Your mind is not as susceptible to tricks and things, optical illusions and such. So it's not a perfect thing either, but most people, myself included, rely on eyesight as our best way to observe things and make observations about stuff. Knowing that what eye tricks and things can be, and related to that, it does help to filter out problems that can arise from eyewitness testimony and things like that, which gets into the point of a current debate I heard with Matt Delahunty and somebody he debated at a church about whether resurrection proofs. And eyewitness testimony, while for generations up until the last century or so, has been the most reliable and pretty much the only way that testimony can be provided for a crime or anything that happened. You have testimony, and that testimony, based on the credulity of the person and their believability, is either believed to be true or not, until there's either a pattern of recognition or like they discover that they've been paid to do so. So there are ways to also fake your testimony, but testimony up until the last century has been probably the biggest way that stories have been shared, history has been recorded, things of that nature, because the testimony is that someone else will write it down. So eventually it will get put into a book form, but that is usually taken from a testimony. Obviously, you can't hold up a book to something and have it automatically write down what's happening yet. Maybe someday in the future with AI, that would be pretty cool. Like you could hold up a picture and it will write down everything that it sees in front of them. 2 monitors, a desk, black desk, brown curtain, white walls, light in the background, 1 male, human, white, bald, around 35 to 40 years old, glasses with blue shading on them, brown eyes, mouth, no disfigurements, wearing a bathrobe, chair in the background, another curtain, fan blades and light in the background. And that testimony, it was acceptable because there was no better way of communicating and proving what is true to be true, because there just wasn't a better way around it. Like then as they started getting math involved and you could write things down to prove your theories, math became a more empirical form. So a lot of people would trust math, data, statistics. All those statistics can be skewed, but a lot of math and things like that help to establish the empirical basis of evidence. Then we get into claims, right? So whether the claim is extraordinary or whether the claim is normal also helps, in my case, and especially with empirical evidence, whether the item is worth trusting in or whether I need more evidence of what that is. And if I want more evidence at that point, then I need to have a little bit more evidence. So when we're asking for empirical evidence, the point of what I'm getting at is this. I understand that the Bible cannot provide empirical evidence. For one thing, it happened in the past. So we can see proofs here and there of things that happened in the past. Our best currently that I'm aware of, other than science, genetics, and DNA, and studying of things like that with geology, genetics, and other fields of study, which I'm blanking on right now, but will come to me later, they can help prove beyond reasonable doubt the accuracy of events, right? Whether that be radiometric dating via not just with carbon dating, but other forms of elements that they use to get the isotopes and test the half-life, which is proven to be fairly accurate, especially when they compare the different types of carbon dating, different types of radiometric dating. So not carbon, that's inappropriate. Radiometric dating, when they use the different elements to compare, depending on when the item was submitted, that kind of gives them an idea of when the item existed. And as a thing that can prove things. So when we look to the Bible and we looking more into like the Evangelical Theological Seminary survey, which they come around and they talk about the Bible every year. They have to affirm the Chicago Creed, and then looking at also the Biblical Theological Society, I think is the other one. I'll have to look that up. But Anyway, there's another one that basically is just people that gather to talk about the Bible and what the Bible, its accuracy and things of that nature and things that surround the Bible. And in so doing, there's very little empirical evidence for a lot of events that happened in the Bible. And again, that was 2,000 years ago for the New Testament. Further than that, if you believe the genealogy of the Bible to be accurate, for other events that happened. And we lack a lot of empirical evidence for major events in the Bible, whether that be Noah's flood, whether that be the Exodus from Egypt, the archaeological evidence of the oldest Jewish towns in Israel does not show Egyptian influence if they had been in Egypt and moved to the Holy Land. And obviously the land was given to them, but they still had to build some as well. So there should be some evidence, some kroners, some Egyptian artifacts that did get transferred because, of course, the Israelites spoiled the Egyptians, according to the Bible. So you would expect to see Egyptian archaeological things inside of the ancient Israel and Israel Jewish archaeological digs, and what you find is that the dig is local to that area, to the Sumerians and also to the local other tribes, the Hittites, all the ites that you read in the Bible. The Israelites were not really they didn't go to Egypt, they didn't come out. They were really close to that area. And I have some videos that you can watch about this, which I'll try to remember. One of which right now has a lot of this in affair, which I know will be very triggering and controversial, is Satan's Guide to the Bible. It's basically done in this style of a Sunday school lesson, and they use this felt, which is as you know is a way that a lot of older classrooms in the churches used to use it because it was very illustrative for the kids. It was very nice to see. So they do it in felt style, and it's actually very creative in that regard. So, but if you take what they're saying with a grain of salt and also at kind of face value, then you hear like what the modern American churches were trying to do in the 1800s to now was to prove that the Bible was accurate based on archaeology, based on geology, based on genetics, and what they found. And what they teach in seminary, at a seminary that's not a Bible college like the one I went to, is that they couldn't really find the evidence that would corroborate the stories that the Bible tells to be true, especially the Old Testament in this case. So again, going to the New Testament, we're looking at things. So obviously, like a lot of that has been lost to history, has been lost to time because wars have happened, who knows what. So I don't really look when I'm reading the Bible, when I'm talking about the Bible and listening to people talk about the Bible, I don't really look for empirical evidence for those things because there isn't much to be found. I'm not saying there's not any, but there is very little. Not as much as you would think, not as much as you would expect if supernatural events took place in this region that would corroborate the Bible story. We would expect to see a lot of things, especially for the flood. Specifically, you would expect to see lots of places globally that would support the biblical account, and we don't. We don't find that. Again, I talked about Moses and the Exodus. That particular, there's no history of it in Egypt. Very little, if any, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but very little, if any, Egyptian influence after the Jews supposedly came into the Promised Land. So. And then when it comes to Jesus, again, that was 2,000 years ago. Rome got burned, burned the city of Jerusalem to the ground, et cetera, et cetera. So by and large, I don't really ask for empirical evidence for that. So then you're like, well, okay, so where do you get your evidence for whether the Bible, what it says is true? And that's, now I get to the point of listening to modern scholarship, not just the ones that I listened to when I was a child, or listened to as I grew up and went to college for, because they're very biased towards making sure that the Bible is accurate and everything that says in it is true. And they have to, because if it's not, then they have a problem, right? But when you listen to the other side of the story, when you listen to the other side of the argument, again, taking that with its own grain of salt, you hear a very different story about the Bible, like how it was actually created, who the authors were, how much evidence that they have for the, like if any originals exist and what state they're in currently right now. The Dead Sea Scrolls are actually of the Alexandrian text, so they do line up very close to what the Bible says, but not exactly. And there's a lot of evidence around the Bible that indicates that the events, the stories, the things that were told in the New Testament in relation to modern scholarship, they don't believe that a lot of those things took place. And as you look on the scale of miracles, so we're going now from evidence-based. So if you look on the scale of miracles from grand miracles back in the Bible age to modern age, the amount of miracles has diminished greatly, right? You pray for healing, and then you become healed. Well, did God do it, or was that a bodily autonomous phenomenon based on your body's ability to repair itself, which the human body remarkably has the ability to do fairly well. Obviously not perfectly, but for the most part, it has a pretty good regenerative ability to take care of scars, minor bruises, even larger ones over a period of time if properly treated, can heal to a point of generally back to a state of movement. And as you get older, of course, those abilities degrade. So the miracles from back 2,000 years ago, we don't see them as much anymore. They just don't happen. They have tested the power of prayer, and often they find, especially in relation to physical ailments, and the power of prayer is not much better than a 50-50 shot. And in some cases, again, there's a margin for error there. It actually makes the person worse, because instead of your outlook and attitude, which generally the more positive you are, the better your outlook, the better your treatment, your body will take care of itself, because it's not fighting your own chemical imbalances and things like that inside your brain. But in addition, it will help with the healing process. So if you have a more positive outlook, generally your treatment will be better. However, when they have tested prayer in surveys and studies, they found that the power of prayer to actually heal miracles, like healing miracles, is around 50%, which is, again, not a great percentage, especially if you believe in it, that a God has the ability to supernaturally heal, supernaturally do these things, and that he cares to do so. It becomes much more clear that just doesn't happen as much anymore. The ability to move mountains, the ability to turn water into wine, resurrections, we hear about them, but the proof that we would want in the modern day is the empirical proof, because those are things we can test and observe. So you claim that a person was resurrected. Was that person actually dead? You claim that a person was healed. Did they go to the doctor before and after? And the only thing that changed was and then can you really attribute that to God, or can you attribute it to the human body's remarkable ability to heal itself? So when we look for empirical evidence today, I don't think it's too far out of the realm of, again, as I've stated, I think I might have stated in other videos, but if not, I'll state it now, that, like in the cases of especially Gideon, I think Gideon is a good example, right? Gideon asked for a fleece out on the ground to not be rained on, and the rest of the ground to be wet, and the fleece to be completely dry. And then he asked for the opposite, and it was true. And then he asked for it again, so I think he did it 3 times, and in each case he was able to prove God via empirical evidence that God actually was supernaturally causing rainstorms to move in the area, caused the water. So it would seem that in Gideon's case, and I think Gideon's a good example, that he was able to ask God for proof that he existed, and he got proof. So while something like a fleece might be believable for some, given my skepticism now, I probably would need more than just a fleece to believe that the God of the Bible still exists and things like that. And I'm not saying that God didn't go back in the past. So you look well, who created us? I'm not saying that God didn't have a hand in it, because I wasn't there. I'm not saying that God didn't kick off the process, because we don't understand the process still 100%. There's a lot of those gaps have been filled in. There's a very good case for common ancestry, that we're all related to to pretty much everything else on the planet, which could have been the seeds of a god or some supernatural or an alien or any number of things. I'm not saying it's God specifically. I'm not just going to say it's God because I don't know, that started life on Earth, and that could be the case. The U.S. government has confirmed the evidence of aliens, which, in my case, in my opinion, if they confirm the existence of aliens, that actually confirms that evolution or abiogenesis, or of associated fields of how we began. Abiogenesis specifically is that happened on other planets in the galaxy. And given the scope of the galaxy, if we take it back to the galaxy scale, it's hard to believe that out of the thousands of planets, millions, probably billions of planets, trillions, or who knows, and the stars and the systems and all those things that are connected, that we are the only life in the universe. Like, that just becomes almost in statistical improbability, right? That there's no other planet in the universe that has life on it. And when we see this life, it'll obviously probably will be foreign to us, but the case is that life can exist in other places in the planet. Usually through what we call evolution, the process. So we have abiogenesis, which is how life began, to evolution, which is the current speciation of how we observe biology and how we observe changes in allele changes in frequency over a period of time. We have determined that, and most even creationists will believe in microevolution, which is the change in the species over a period of time. So as a form of empirical evidence, they believe in that, and they preach it. They say it, but they say that particular speciation only occurs, that doesn't expand outside of that species. However, as with, given Darwin as the example of his finches, they basically evolved. So when they separated, they evolved into even though you could tell an ancestry because they look so similar on different islands, they could not breed, they could not mate. So therefore, they were a different species, and it makes sense to a point that maybe life began that way. So there's different conditions that caused whatever that common ancestor was. Again, these are speculations, so I'm not 100% clear on the science as it is, but whatever the common ancestor was, different conditions, different environmental conditions probably caused the changing into different things as we would observe in evolution today. So what I'm not saying is that a god or alien or some other thing didn't start the process, because we don't know. And because we don't know, I don't think Christians have a good ground to stand on either. They say God did it, but there's good evidence to say that God didn't do it, and that the kinds, especially if you listen to the Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate, the point that Bill Nye brings up is that if everything came off the ark 4,000 years ago, the speciation we see today and the speciation that they said is on the ark does not match up. This is one of the points of empirical evidence that disproves the Bible story to be accurate. Because if there were just limited species, the amount of speciation we see in the canine kind or the cat kind or things like that, obviously you have different ends of the spectrum. You have tigers on one end and you have little tiny pussy cats on the other. You have lions on one end and chihuahuas on the other. So there's a lot of speciation that happened in the last 4,000 years. But if you take that to the point, Bill Nye's point was you would see new species almost every day. The amount of species does not confirm the story of the Bible to be accurate. So the empirical evidence in that case is that they look at the speciation rates, they look at the speciation, and they say that based on the rates of the speciation, things like that, there's no way it could have been this case. This could have been the case. So then we're going on from empirical testimony. So now we'll go on to probably the most common used, which again, looking historical versus empirical and things like that, empirical evidence and asking for empirical evidence is, often the claim of testimony, right? That God supernaturally moved in a person, that I felt when I was a Christian, I believe I felt the presence of God at certain times in my life. But looking back through the lens of, more skepticism, I'm not quite sure that ever happened. It was me being emotional. It was me being speaking to myself and affirming to myself certain things, entering, certain traumatic states of my own and coming out of it on my own. The inner dialogue that I had that I thought I was having with God, I can't really confirm that was in fact inner dialogue with God, which goes back to my point of that, if the Holy Spirit was interacting with me, like at some point he stopped, and maybe because I was hard-hearted or whatever, but I used the example of the Egyptian Pharaoh that, it says specifically, and I know there's a lot of controversy on this, but it says specifically that God hardened his heart. And I believe that I am in a similar case. And I don't say that proudly, I don't say that greatly, but I say that to the point that it's the truth. Like, how could I look at these things with an unbiased opinion as much as I can? Again, I was biased towards Christianity. I wanted to prove it to be true. And when I listened to the arguments on the other side, and that's, a key point of the story and my news diet, things like that I now affirm, is using apps like Ground News that shows you the bias on both sides, shows you what the story is telling on both sides, left, right, center, and gives you the breakdown of what they're reporting on and how they're reporting on it. It gives you an understanding that, and I don't want to live myself in a wind tunnel. I look for things that challenge my currently held beliefs to make sure that what I'm believing is actually accurate and true to reality. So, moving on to the point of testimony and the Christian testimony, which is supposed to be their most powerful tool, right? When I was in the Christian faith, my Christian testimony was the thing that they heralded the most. Like, if you can't tell them anything else, tell them your testimony. Tell them what Christ did for you. Tell them how he saved you, all these things. And it's the point of, like, that humbling and you coming to God and the crying and the stories and all the things that are bundled into that emotion, that package that Christianity offers of salvation, that Christian testimony. And I believe that the emotions experienced at the time of that, especially, can be real. You have a outgrouping of people that generally care for and love. And again, due to the Bible's claims on hell, I understand why you would want those feelings to be conveyed, because you do believe that you are trying to save this person from an everlasting torment. Commendable. So when the person is down at the altar, generally in a church setting, they have the invitation time, and the person is down and they've just gone through this semi-hypnotic experience with the music, the message, and are now being prompted to respond, just as you would in like a hypnotic show. If you're a Bible-believing Christian and you've never gone to a hypnotic show, I think you should. And look at the differences between how a hypnotist show is set up, and then compare that to your church service, and look at how many similarities that there are. So the conversion, the testimony, right? You have the sinner understanding they're a sinner, understanding they're bad, which is very easy for humans to do. Myself, you could convince me that I've done bad things very easily. And so you put on a measure of guilt and shame, right, onto me. So now I understand that I have shame in my life. I am ashamed that I am the way that I am, and I want to change. Self-help, self-motivation conferences are built around this principle. So again, attend a self-help motivation conference and see the similarities. So you are convinced that you need to change. You have generally family or friends that want you to change, that love you, that care about you, don't want you to spend an eternity in hell. So you walk down the aisle and you get down on your knees and you listen to the Romans Road or some semblance of it or some other salvation narrative, and you come off of it after praying a prayer and expressing genuine remorse for your actions, and you feel better. You feel like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders, that God has relieved you of this, and that's great. That's wonderful. Awesome. But it's not unique. So the version of testimony, I felt the same at the end of a hypnotist show. I felt the same because they basically can hypnotize you to act in certain ways. I felt the same at the end of a self-motivation show, like, hey, I suck, I want to change, I'm going to change. That feeling, and again, coming with people around you that want the same helps reinforce whatever has been offered as the change. So you come out of that and you feel great and you want to tell the world what Christ has done for you and you want to share that story with everybody, and that is your most powerful version that you have. And even with like testimony of products like healing products like essential oils or infomercials where they say this product will dramatically change your life, will help fix your foot pain, will help fix your back pain, will help fix your this or that. Yes, of course it's going to help alleviate some of the symptoms, but it probably won't help or alleviate the cause. And eventually you will go back to generally feeling, unless you have taken care of the root cause, it will generally go back to feeling the way that you did before you began the treatment, unless you continue the treatment to continuously alleviate the symptoms as they arrive, which is why you have to continue going back to church, because more and more symptoms have to be discovered, they have to be addressed to make you feel bad, to get you to confess, to relive that testimony over and over again. So every church service essentially is a reinforcement of the ideas that you are bad and you are in need of a change, and Christ is the change that you need. And that's the reason why I don't really accept testimony either. Not because I don't find it compelling, because obviously testimony is compelling. That's how most people around the world do anything. And I'm not saying that I'm skeptical of all products. Like, yes, of course I enjoy buying some products from time to time that claim to have healing effects or better effects that can improve my life. I'd be an idiot not to say that I didn't, want to test out various things to make my life better would be silly, would be foolish, right? Again, treatment of cause and the symptom difference, right? Just like in the medical, you like often they can tell you they can alleviate your symptoms, but they can't actually address the cause of your cancer. So they can alleviate your symptoms, they can alleviate your pain, they'll give you medicine, but they can't actually address the root cause of the problem. It's the same in Christianity, because they continually have to sell you that there is a problem, you need to fix it, Christ is the answer. So for those reasons, this is why I don't necessarily ask for empirical evidence as much. For one thing, I'm not smart enough to really read and understand scientific journals. Like, yes, I can get a basic layman's understanding of it, but oftentimes the technical level of it goes over my head. I wish I was better understanding of these kind of things. I wish I had a better brain that could understand them, and it takes me time. What I'm saying is that it takes me time to understand advanced concepts. Probably just as it does with anybody, but in the amount of time that I want to invest in that advanced concept is where I draw the line. So if this is something that related to my job or something that can relate to my family or just my general improvement or fun of life, things like that, hobbies I want to learn, things I want to take up. There are skills that you can learn. There are skills that you can think. There are sometimes intuitions into those skills that you cannot learn, that are inbred in certain people, and hopefully, if everything works out perfectly, they become invested into that field and can flourish in that field and push it beyond what current technology science is capable of doing. We see this happening all the time, especially in the technological field. Where I was going with this is that I don't ask for empirical evidence because I don't understand it. So when it comes to authorities, then, so we'll go on to that. On to authority, what is the authority telling me is the solution to my problem, right? So the authority then has the ability to, will I trust the authority on the subject? So if that's, the Bible, that would probably be a pastor, right? But as I've discovered from listening to biblical scholars and supposed anti-biblical scholars, regardless, but people that study the Bible and how it was made, how we got the iteration of the Bible today, the historical accuracy of the Bible, the people that read the Greek manuscripts and can tell you, kind of point things that you think are, that you've always thought as a Christian, your general layman knowledge, but it's actually not accurate. And then learning about seminaries telling potential points that are inside, so Catholic seminaries or other seminaries that teach a lot of the problems with the Bible and teach you how to combat them or to simply just ignore them and provide an answer. Again, you have 2,000 years. So that authority, will I trust the authority on the subject? When it comes to most science, the answer is yes. I'm going to trust, depending on who, so if I can find out who is sponsoring the science, that's a key point. Like, do they have a investment in making science look a certain way? Because you can make empirical evidence, you can twist it and make it to pierce one way when it's actually not. There are many documentaries detailing this over a period of time, especially with the no-fat craze of, I want to say it was the 1990s. I think it was 1990s into 2000s. Like, a lot of people was like, no fat, no fat, no fat. Well, actually, in reality, a certain amount of fat is good for you. It also has similar powers to carbohydrates and things like that, can provide you fuel. So no fat is not good, but the fat industry or the sugar industry was looking for a way to combat that. And we're looking to ways to get more products into more people. So they combated fat. They made it no fat and instead replace it with sugar or something of that nature. And in chemically altering it, they obviously made problems with the thing. So again, if I can trust the science on it, so do I trust the scientist? The answer is most of the time, yes. Depending on how reliable the source is, who I think is funding the source, right? That's an important part because they have a say in what they want the source to say. With the vaccines cause autism thing, and I forget, the names are forgetting me right now, but if you look like about the guy that wanted to spread out vaccinations, so basically so he could put in a certain vaccination and sell it as a cure, and he was revealed to be giving false information that MMR, so yeah, measles, mumps, and rubella, right? The MMR vaccine, he said, caused autism, and he got science to say that what he wanted, and he peddled that to everybody, saying they should not all get the MMR vaccine, but instead should get his vaccine. So he was sponsored by pharmaceuticals, and I forget his name all of a sudden. Let me see if I can find it real fast. Let me see. And I can't find it right off the top. But anyway, so he basically went into it, and that's right, Brian Deere, Andrew Wakefield. There we go, Wakefield. So Wakefield was the guy who was peddling a certain pharmaceutical, and he was in position to gain a lot of money from telling people that the MMR vaccine caused autism or other problems. But his evidence did not back up the claims that he made. And an expose by a fellow named Brian Deere, and there's plenty of videos online about this, basically exposed that what he said was bullshit and that the MMR vaccine is safe, and thus causing a rise of measles, mumps, and rubella in places that people denied the MMR vaccine. So not only did he not get his own pharmaceuticals published, but he also got exposed and caused people to stop trusting in vaccines, which back in the 1920s would have been an excited or lauded achievement. So to the point of, do I trust science? Yes, I do, and no, I don't. I do, depending on what I can read about it, seemingly how, again, just like with any authority source now, I trust, their reliability, their trustworthiness. As I've gotten older, I've been learn skills to better determine who is trustworthy and who is not, and understand mannerisms. Sometimes it's a gut feeling. Other times it's digging and doing further research. Oftentimes that's the best way to do it is to do further research, especially on claims that seem absurd or too good to be true. The phrase, if it's too good to be true, it probably is generally accurate. Not 100%. Obviously, there are times when something is too good to be true, and it is. It actually is too good to be true, and it actually is too good to be true. But more than often than the case, probably around 70% of the time, if something is too good to be true, it is too good to be true. I definitely squandered that, did not make that clear, but either way, I think you understand the general meaning of that. So when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to testimony, what I need from God, and a God would understand this, what I would want from God is something if I were to ask him for something, and I'm not sure exactly what that would be, something that I could prove to, in my case, in my opinion, it would have to be something I could also prove to others that, hey, God is real. Like, this is what happened. This is verifiable. Here's the video proof. Here's the scientific proof. Here's all the proofs that would make anybody believe, right? So I could stop being an atheist. So I could ask God essentially for a miracle, and here's all the proof without any doctrine. I could have other people around to witness and testimony, peer review. That's what peer review is. So I could have other people to verify the results of what I'm saying is true, and I could spread that to everybody and say, hey, here's empirical proof that God is true. We don't really see that anymore today. If God did have a hand in the past, which he might have, he doesn't seem to be around anymore. He doesn't seem to care anymore. You can't tell me like that, with the starvation, with the way that the world is right now, that a God cares about us in any reasonable way. I don't think that that's true. I think humans care about other humans in reasonable ways, and I think the people that care about other people in most ways outweigh the people who don't. When it comes to my coworkers, when it comes to people I work with, obviously there are bad people out there. I'm not saying that they're not. There definitely are. But by and large, the common people that I interact with on most cases, in most days, the people that are working, trying to make a living, trying to get by, the people that I interact with, and again, I interact with common people because I am common. They're good people. There's evidence to support that some celebrities are good people, some politicians are good people. I'm not saying that all of them are bad. Lawyers are. Just kidding. There are obviously good lawyers out there too. But this is why I don't trust empirical evidence. This is why I don't ask for it in a debate session, because I don't believe I can get any. Or if I get some, it won't be enough. It won't be sufficient to prove the validity of the claim being made. And so hopefully that helps. Hopefully this will help other people understand why maybe asking for empirical evidence isn't good enough, and also understanding why testimony can be faulty, and understanding my opinions on empirical evidence in relation to authority and in relation to other things. So we'll catch you later.